Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.
This summer, Bruce Willis is back in business.
Thanks for saving me, tough guy.
And business is booming.
I was afraid you weren't going to drop by.
Hudson Hawk.
That excites me.
Check, please.
The best cat burglar that ever lived.
I didn't want to do it. All I wanted was a cappuccino.
But he can't retire.
Maybe nobody told you. I quit stealing.
If he wants to keep on living.
This is a brand new tuxedo!
Watch your step. Hold your breath. Hang on for dear life. And catch the Hawk.
Good plan, Junior.
Bruce Willis, Danny-Aiello, Andie-Macdowell, Hudson Hawk.
Sounds like a party.
Welcome to the Projection Booth. I'm your host, Mike White. Joining me is Mr. Steven Scarlata.
Thank you for having me on again.
Also joining us this week is Mr. Jamey Duvall of Movie Geeks United.
Barry Manilow's Copacabana, 3 minutes, 35 seconds.
This week we are talking about the 1991 film Hudson Hawk. Directed by Michael Lehmann and written by Daniel Waters and Steven-e-de-Souza, the film stars Bruce Willis as the titular cat burglar who becomes embroiled in an ever-deepening web of intrigue and wild adventures and a comedy, action, musical drama. Steven, when was the first time that you saw Hudson Hawk, and what did you think?
Actually, I saw it the year it came out. I watched it on Christmas Eve that year. I rented it. I wanted to see it really bad in the theaters because when I was around 13, I saw I remember I saw the Deadpool, and then I snuck into Die Hard, and it blew my mind. I couldn't believe it, and I was immediately like a really huge Bruce Willis fan. And the year after, I saw Die Hard, or the year after that, I saw Die Hard 2 in the theaters, and again loved it. And Hudson Hawk, when it was coming out, it was a pretty big deal. You know, the mall had a big freaking cardboard standee for it, and I missed it theatrically, but immediately rented it when it came out, and I loved it. I was like maybe 16 at the time, and I think I was the perfect age for it because it was just this fun, violent romp with action, and I ate it up with a knife and fork. Like I remember all the bad reviews that came out, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, what is this movie? This movie's the best. It's not bad. I loved it. Like, I flipped for Hudson Hawk. I watched it quite a few times growing up, and I tell you the truth, I hadn't watched it until this podcast. So it'd be interesting to talk about.
I was the one person who saw it on opening night. It arrived with a lot of bad buzz, so I went to the theater with that in mind. In some ways, it didn't disappoint, and in other ways, I recognized where the bad buzz was coming from, because immediately I thought, this is a very easy movie to try to take down a notch, because everyone involved in it is so eager to please and entertain. I thought that was where a lot of the criticisms were coming from. But I liked it a little bit more than I thought I would. I was entertained more than I thought I would be.
I saw this one on VHS. I believe that my friend Mike Thompson, who I initially thought was a huge a-hole, and I'm sure that he thought I was the same. After we finally overcame that, we started a friendship, and one of the things that he recommended to me was Hudson Hawk, and I had been scared away by all that bad buzz, even though I'm kind of I like Bruce Willis a lot, and there's a lot of things that he's in that I shouldn't like, or reasons why I shouldn't necessarily like him sometimes, but I still end up doing so. And I rented this thing on VHS, and it was everything that Mike Thompson promised and more. Just so balls out fucking crazy that I really couldn't believe what I was seeing. And I just kind of sit on this fence between liking it a lot, despising it, and then coming back to liking it again. and sometimes is within one viewing is where I'm at, because there are times where I'm just like, oh my God, this is such this ego project from Bruce Willis. You know, I had seen The Return of Bruno. I knew what he was capable of as far as like getting up his own ass. And there's a lot of times where he is just diving deep when it comes to being up his own ass in this film. But then other times are just like this, there are moments of brilliance. There are moments of brilliance with like Richard E. Grant and Sandra-Bernhard, but there are just other terrific spots to this film. And it's like this fascinating failure that I just really get into. I mean, it's funny because as I'm reading about the film, I'm reading all of these comparisons because, The Last Action Hero came out a few months after this, or actually I think it was 2 years after this. And just, people were like, oh my God, this is so bad. Give us something like Hudson Hawk again. They were already like willing to to go back to Hudson Hawk. And I think that there are some really good moments to this film. And I will say that I like Hudson Hawk. I can sit down and watch this movie, kind of like you, Steven. I can sit down and watch this fairly often and find a lot of enjoyment out of it.
I think what it is too, as a kid watching it, it's pretty much like a live action violent cartoon in a way with bad language, so it's almost like reevaluating it. If they would have just maybe trimmed some of the F words and trimmed some of the violence, they could have got a PG-13 movie out of this. And maybe it would have been a hit like that, because I think maybe it was pointed towards the wrong audiences when it came out. I think like I was, seeing Die Hard 2 in the theaters and being blown away by it. And then the following summer, this comes out, and those audiences were probably like, what is this? We wanted to see, John McClane. And this is just, I can't imagine what those audiences thought, because it's kind of madness, this film.
Well, I have to say that the trailer that I dug up to introduce the episode, they really emphasize the action. And I think that was such the wrong move to do. They really should have been emphasizing the comedy. And I don't know if it's that the last big Bruce Willis comedy we had was Blind Date, which I don't think went down well with audiences. But really, they should have just kind of concentrated on that whole idea of the moonlighting, David Addison kind of thing, where he was able to balance humor and action very well. And that's the thing, to your point, as far as Die Hard, I love that it has the humor moments to it amongst all of the action bits. And just, those are the lines that we all remember and the moments that we remember the most. And I think that audiences were very surprised at just how much that pendulum had swung into the humor versus the action. And, if they came in expecting a balls-out action film like a Die Hard 2 or Die Hard 1, they were definitely in for a big surprise, and I don't think a pleasant one.
Yeah, I don't think that the studio probably, I would imagine that the studio was probably nervous, and how the hell do we market this? We'll market it for what people love Bruce Willis for, which is the action. You want to see Bruce Willis, the action hero. Let's take that route. Most of the movie doesn't work for me. There's like that thin line between endearing and grating, and it kind of veers off into the grating category for me more often than not. But even so, I've always admired that Hudson Hawk is a completely balls-out movie. I found it a very kind of bold exercise in goofiness.
One of the things I think is the strangest thing for me, and it actually took me quite a few viewings before I could get my head around the plot. And I don't mean to say like this is some sort of a labyrinthine type plot here where things are changing every few minutes. It's no sort of like Christopher Nolan twist and turn type ride of excitement here, but just the whole idea of how many people are involved in it, because we've got Bruce Willis, we set it up as, first we have the opening scene where we're talking about Da Vinci, and we have this whole, kind of Da Vinci's greatest hits thing going on where he's, creating this alchemy machine, which will play this major part. We see him creating a glider airplane type thing, which again will come back later. And then we have to have the obligatory laugh line where we are showing why the Mona Lisa is not, smiling with her teeth and stuff. And it's just this kind of it's campy but fun kind of thing. And then we immediately move 500 years in the future.
One of the flaws I always had with this film was that narration. It's not in the screenplay, so they obviously threw it in there last minute, probably because maybe the opening was too slow and people weren't going to understand it. But it is they picked the weirdest guy to do that narration. Even the way he says Hudson Hawk with a strange whistle into his tone. It's just it's so bizarre, that narration.
It sounds like Walter Brennan or something like that. It's this weird, it's Hudson Hawk. I mean, it's so kind of overcooked.
I actually went back to Daniel Waters last night and I said, I forgot to ask you about the narrator. It's credited to William Conrad, but there's no way that that's William Conrad. If you guys remember William Conrad, Jake and the Fat Man, all the way back to Bullwinkle and stuff, he had that amazing baritone. He was the voice of authority. And he was just so great with his voice.
Chrysler has fire in its eyes. Take charge with a 440 V8. It'll take the measure of anything moving. Take charge with the biggest brakes in the price class.
And then, I was like, that sounds more like the guy that used to do Winnie the Pooh's voice rather than William Conrad. And he was like, no, it was William Conrad. It was 2 years before he died. But then I even went back and watched an old Jake and the Fat Man episode just to see, did he have a stroke or something? Did something affect his voice? But I think he was just putting on a voice. And I had a real hard time, even knowing it's William Conrad, to say that's William Conrad's voice. It just does not sound like him whatsoever.
Exactly 500 years later, an artiste of a different field, the one of cat burglary, was getting out of Sing Sing. He was known as the Hudson Hawk.
I think you described it perfectly. It sounds like William Conrad with a stroke. I think you put it very succinctly.
But if this was being shot in 90 going into 91, and I looked up Jake and the Fat Man, and it looks like that ran until 94, and I can't remember when William Conrad passed away, but he was getting around in the show, and he sounded okay, at least in the episode that I saw. So, I don't know what was going on with this. It was a very weird choice for that voiceover. I definitely agree.
Actually, the first time I saw it, it got to me, and then on this repeated viewing. But I just out of everybody they could have got it. I don't know why it just drives me so crazy, that voiceover, that narration, and it never comes back. Well, I guess it comes back in at the very ending for 2 seconds, and then that's it. It's.
To your point, it's not in the script, though. I think that there are some lines in the script that the narrator says almost verbatim as far as the description of the scene and stuff. And so we go 500 years in the future, and we've got Hudson Hawk, Eddie Hawkins, coming out of jail. We are immediately introduced to his parole officer, and his parole officer is the first crooked person that we meet, and we're just going to get so many. And that's the thing that kind of confused me, like I was saying about this plot, is that he's surrounded by bad guys all the time, and it's like every single person he meets gets worse and worse and worse, and it just took me the longest time to realize that they are all really part of one plot. Like, it felt like there were many plots going on. Like, I thought there was the parole officer plot happening. I thought there were the Mario Brothers plot happening. I thought there was the CIA plot happening. I thought there was the Mayflowers plot. I thought there was that going, and then only to find that they're all working together. So that, plus then adding in the Vatican later on, it's just like, oh, okay. So really there's only two strings happening, the Mayflowers all the way down to the parole officer, and then we've got the Vatican, and that's it. But I kept getting everybody confused, especially because the Vatican thought that the CIA was working for them, but they were actually working for the Mayflowers. But it just really confused me because it gets deep pretty fast.
Yeah, and I think also we're coming out of the 80s, and it's still slightly dipped in action movies, because what I noticed something about the 80s, it's the era of the mini-boss in action films. You know, you always set up like these mini-boss characters you have to fight and kill to get to the next guy. And I always loved that. So as a kid watching this, you know, I that was something I've always liked in action films, you know, like especially Commando is like a fucking mini boss movie, one after the other he takes out. And it is a Joel Silver movie like those other action films. So I kind of dig all these little bad guys that are constantly coming into the fold.
You know, you got to give Hudson Hawk points for casting Frank Stallone as one of those little bosses.
And that kind of nice in-joke, too, where it's like, these are instructions that even your brother can understand.
Mm-hmm.
He's really fantastic in it. And it's a shame he wasn't in any other stuff. I mean, this must be the largest film he's ever been in, you know, and he's really good in it. He's really funny.
There are so many good set pieces in this film as well. And I will say that, I mean, it could be cheesy as heck, but I actually like the whole thing of Bruce Willis on the hospital gurney, like going across the Brooklyn Bridge and everything. I mean, that to me, you know, this film was written by Daniel Waters or rewritten by Daniel Waters, and that feels like one of these Ford Fairlane type, action sequences to me. Like especially the whole like muttering under the breath and all this kind of stuff, and like the whole, can you believe that this is happening to me? It so reminds me of like the cemetery chase in Adventures of Ford Fairlane.
I love the little toll booth sequences. Is really
well. That's the weird thing too. I know that you read the script of this one, and so did I. And Jamie, I don't know if you had a chance to, but just the whole thing, like you come to a scene like that, and obviously in our versions of the screenplays that we have, these PDFs, we don't have blue pages in these things. It's all black and white. So it's strange. You come to certain sections of the movie and all of a sudden the scene plays like 3 or 4 times in the script, and each time is written just a little bit different. It's like we've got the rewrites, but then there are times where it's like you just have different possible laugh lines that Bruce Willis can say. So like the whole thing, like towards the end of the movie where one of the characters gets his head cut off, and it's like,
you won't be attending that hat convention in July.
When you look at the script, there's like 5 or 6 different variations upon that, and it's just like, which one's going to work? So let's give Bruce all of these different lines and let's see how this is. So same thing with that Brooklyn Bridge thing. It's just like, okay, here's all these possible things that Bruce can say. Let's have him say everything and see which one sticks.
Yeah, that is the trip. It got me off guard at first, and then I realized that's what was happening, because the script is really long. It can't be that long, and then I realized there's also lyrics to all the songs and after the scene, and so like, yeah, the scene even on the freeway, or not the highway going towards the toll, there's all kinds of conversations you can have with people in passing cars, and then you see the one they actually chose with the 2 girls. Yeah, that was kind of a trip. And one of the things I think I read also during the making of, because it was mostly Bruce Willis's project, is that, and one of the reasons why it's, you know, like the days went really long is because at the end of every take he was watching the scenes also, and then he was like, oh, let me shoot that again with a different joke. So I wonder if those are from the set, or those, even on top of those, they were adding in even more jokes on top. I wonder.
Yeah, and it definitely sounds like he and Michael Lehmann didn't necessarily see eye to eye on a lot of stuff. Like I was reading some, kind of reports from the set where it was like, oh, well, the director wanted us to do, one continuous take, but Bruce wanted it to be several, or, Michael wanted it to be a dolly shot, but Bruce wanted it to track or whatever. And it was just like, okay, it seems like it was kind of co-directed or coerce directed, as it were. So I can't imagine that made for a very pleasant experience. Though I have to give Michael Lehmann props on the audio commentary. He definitely doesn't seem to have a lot of sour grapes going on, which is good.
Yeah, it must have been like, well, for him, this is probably I think this is his biggest budget, and coming off of Heathers and Meet the Applegates, like, good Lord, like, this is a huge playing ground. You have when's the budget? I mean, the budget's all over. I keep reading different things about the budget, but it's a 65, I guess, or 85. It goes all over the place. So for him, it must have been, it must be a really important film for him, because he never had anything like that. He was going all over the world for months shooting this really huge film. So it is kind of cool to hear that he is still defending it.
It's interesting that it is such a global project, because there are times where I'm just like, why did you necessarily need to shoot like so much in Rome, or why did this need to be here? And it was just like, I mean, because there's a couple shots where I'm like, okay, yeah, that's Rome for sure. You're in Rome, kind of thing. But then other times I'm like, yeah, I'm sure you can find a set that would just double that without too much of a problem.
I agree, but the whole spirit of the movie is one of excess. So
oh yeah,
yeah. So I think it fits right into that. And speaking of the excess and kind of the different lines that they would give Bruce Willis to see which one clicked. I mean, we hear that a lot now from someone like Adam McKay or Judd Apatow, who off camera they tell the actor a laugh line to say on camera during a take. So there's one school of thought that says that's a great way to work. There's another school of thought that says that shows kind of an insecurity in your screenplay. And another thing with the laugh lines, a slight problem I have with Hudson Hawk, is that everyone is trying to be funny in it. Like every piece of dialogue is designed to be a laugh line, no matter who's saying it. And I was watching a review that Siskel and Ebert did of Hudson Hawk, and they brought up a point that they said that they thought it could have been a much more successful movie if those kind of hijinks were just relegated to the Bruce Willis and Danny-Aiello characters.
Right.
And maybe all the peripheral characters played it straight. And I thought that was an interesting notion, and I didn't know what you guys think about that.
Well, if you watch a Marx Brothers movie, you've got the 3 or 4 crazy people in the middle of the action, and then everybody else is just trying to figure out what is going on, or just kind of have their own movie, and then these guys are this force of chaos that come in and kind of wreck everything. And I could see that as far as like if Aiello and Willis were those forces of chaos just coming in and screwing up everybody's plans. If this was more of a comedy of manners rather than a screwball comedy, or if they were these representations of screwball inside of a comedy of manners, because we've seen the whole idea of the robberies and all these kind of things. We there's the one character who talks about being like David Niven, sneaking in and sneaking out. The Richard E. Grant character says that. And, I know there are elements of like Top Copy and To Catch a Thief and these kind of films that are used as a blueprint, or of course, North by Northwest is also a blueprint with the whole George Kaplan thing. But yeah, I could see those are playing it straight, and then you bring in these 2 crazy characters, or maybe even a 3rd crazy character when you have the andie-macdowell character in there as well. If she ends up becoming unhinged as the events go on as well, I don't know. I kind of like some of the stuff, and of course I love the Richard E. Grant and Sandra-Bernhard characters. I think the Mayflowers are just such a wonderful addition to this, and the way that they play it to the absolute hilt throughout this whole thing is just, I love it. I love everything that comes out of their mouths.
That's the one thing I guess you would lose if all the other characters, if Hudson Hawk and his partner were the only wacky ones, you would lose that amazing performance from these guys. But then again, if Hudson Hawk and Danny-Aiello were the only wacky characters, and if everyone else was more serious, maybe you would feel there was more on the line. Like you'd feel more scared of Hudson Hawk going back to prison and stuff like that, because like it just feels like, like John McClane in Die Hard, he bleeds and he gets injured and he limps, and Hudson Hawk just is constantly getting pummeled, but it's nothing. He's a living cartoon. So maybe in a way, if the other characters were serious, you'd feel more scared. But yeah, you would lose that incredible performance from Bernhard and Richard E. Grant, and they are definitely the glue to this film too.
I might find more of the movie funny if I didn't feel like everyone was competing for the laugh. I thought that might have been to the detriment of the movie. But there are, I mean, Richard E. Grant, I always laugh at two places in the film, and one of them belongs to Richard E. Grant. When he first is talking to Bruce Willis, and he's tied up, and just out of the blue, he just walks, it's just a throwaway, he just walks right past his henchman, the one with the sword, and just slaps him on the face. It's like, it's a split-second throwaway. And then the other moment that is so unadulterated silliness is when he sees Frank Stallone at the bar in the first 10 or so minutes of it. And Danny-Aiello whacks Frank Stallone's henchman over the head with the wine bottle. Before they get up to leave, there's that slow motion shot of the henchman looking all dazed, pointing his threatening finger at Bruce Willis, and that little drum beat on the soundtrack that's so overdramatic. For some reason, I see that, and that's piss my pants funny to me. It's so silly.
The scene when he's in Gates' apartment and Gates is holding the horse, and he's like, I might not know art, but I know what I like. And Hawk looks at the dogs playing poker picture. That killed me when I was a kid, and it kills me now. I just lose it. Like, that is just, I don't know what it is, but that kills me.
I think what might put it too far over into that one column is the whole idea of the candy bars, the CIA coming in, and all of them having the candy bar code names and all that kind of stuff. A lot of that just doesn't necessarily work for me. Like, the one guy who plays Snickers, absolutely fine with him. The guy who plays Butterfinger, actually there are times where he is pretty darn funny, especially when he starts calling James Coburn Coach towards the end of the film.
Oh, the part he's like, you're making it come out of my nose. That is really fucking funny. He nails that part.
The Kit Kat thing, I love David-Caruso in this film. I think he is absolutely brilliant in his miming and not saying a word and the little cards and stuff, but he just feels like he's in another movie a lot of times, where it's just like, I wish there was another film where this character existed, because he just doesn't necessarily fit with the rest of the candy bars. Mm-hmm. And then I feel really bad saying this, but the woman who plays Almond Joy, she gives the worst line reading in the entire movie. And I can never get past it. It just like stops the whole film dead for me when she delivers that line of,
George, you promised no old CIA, new CIA jokes.
It is just the clunker of all clunkers, man.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, this movie's really walking a tightrope, and you don't know what's going to hit and what's not going to hit. I mean, the Naked Gun movies are much the same way, and maybe that was the thinking. Maybe just keep them coming as fast as we can, because some of them will hit, and some of them won't. Maybe, but the important thing is that our batting average is above 500 or whatever.
Well, she actually had more lines in the script. There's a couple of scenes, and they're not in the film at all. So I wonder what happened there. But the Kit Kat character, I do like him. He is I wish there was more of him in the film. He was like my favorite of that whole gang, the candy bars. Interesting enough, in the novelization, and the script does the same thing. They notice on Caruso's hands, one says like hate, and the other one says frog for some reason. It's tattooed. And in the novelization, it mentions the reason why he never talks is because he's had his tongue was cut off, and it doesn't say where. But it's kind of this. I kind of like that, and I kind of wish they kept that in the film, because the film has these weird, violent scenes, and just adding in another kind of aspect like that, I would have really dug to see in the film, because it still kind of brings it back that there's dark elements that you should be worried about these characters sometimes. That's not just all Looney Tunes.
That's just a weird break to have in the industry, to play a candy bar in a Bruce Willis movie.
Lehmann on the audio commentary talks about how they actually have a prosthetic made for Caruso's mouth so that it looked like his tongue was removed. And at one point somebody asks him, what's the matter, cat, got your tongue? And he opens his mouth and you see no tongue inside of it. But apparently he couldn't get Caruso to give the right performance for that part, and Caruso didn't really want to do it at all, so that would have been nice had we seen that. I think him as Kit Kat might be my favorite David Caruso performance. Maybe him in Without Warning might have been up there, but I think him as Kit Kat was probably the thing, especially like when they tell him to go watch, it's before the Andie-Macdowell when he's in drag, but there's one part where he's dressed up as a statue. I just love that. I love the reveal of him as being the statue.
Not only that, I love the sound effects. You know, it sounds like like stone moving when he moves his head and everything. I love that little touch.
So yeah, we've got so many things that are happening in this movie. At one point, I was going to try to, have us talk in a linear fashion, but it just really doesn't make a whole lot of sense as we're trying to take this thing apart because there are just so many parts to it. I mean, we haven't even talked about like the Andie-Macdowell character and her working at the Vatican, and
they brought in Andie-Macdowell like last minute because I forgot who the original actress was, and I think that's probably why. I don't think she wasn't the first choice. I mean, I get she was hot at the time because of Sex, Lies, and Videotape and everything, but yeah, she didn't really have any chemistry with Bruce Willis. I didn't really see, and I think that might have just been a problem right there.
How do you like that dolphin scene?
Yeah, next to the narration, that's the other sequence that gets to me.
It is just so shrill and piercing, her dolphin impersonation. It just drives me nuts. I kind of wish that she had gotten an Iganook kind of treatment and had her brains blown out at that point. So it's just like, shut up. And I don't know if she's doing it on purpose, or on porpoise, I suppose, or if she really is having a bad reaction to the Quarari or whatever, the numbing agent that she has been given. But yeah, she's very enigmatic. Let's just say that as far as her character. I never really get to know her very well.
I mean, I can imagine, especially if she was kind of a last-minute addition to it, that she was probably on that set and she was thinking to herself, what the hell am I in? I mean, so I have some empathy for her if that was the case.
I think even the last scene of the film when danny-aiello comes back from the dead for like the third time, she has like another line there that's just really off.
You're supposed to be blown up into fiery chunks of flesh.
Yeah, it's not delivered very well, unfortunately.
It's so funny because I was reading some reviews of the film, reading reviews from the time, reading reviews kind of like, written over the last few years, as this movie has been quote unquote discovered, on DVD or on Netflix and stuff. And just, there was one guy, you were talking about how Bruce Willis and danny-aiello, they are basically living cartoon characters, and there was somebody complaining about how can they fall out of a 2-story window and land and they're still fighting and be okay. They would have broken bones and stuff. And I'm just like, really?
Wow.
You want to add reality to this? And then another reviewer, I don't even think it was the same guy, I want to say it was another reviewer, was complaining about the end with danny-aiello coming back from the dead. And I was just like, they purposefully make fun of that in the movie, the whole well, what about this? Well, they had sprinklers. Well, what about this? It's just airbags, and it's like they're making fun of it in the movie. So what, they're not, it's like people aren't picking up on the humor.
No, not at all. Like, at what point did these critics think they were watching a Merchant Ivory movie? I mean, I don't understand. But one of the silly devices that I thought really worked was the Swinging on a Star. Was the whole cat burglary time to their rendition of Swinging on a Star. That's probably my favorite sequence in the movie, and it's an ingenious idea that, like most of the movie's ideas, could have completely flopped. I mean, there is a real bravery in this movie that I do give it credit for.
Like, they set it up very well as far as, quizzing each other as far as times of songs and everything. And you don't necessarily know why that is. And then when it starts, it's just like, okay, this makes sense. And then, when they start singing in the movie, a lot of people really could have gotten completely turned off at that point. But I was with it. I was with this film at that point, and I was really very pleasantly surprised. And it could have just I can really see, like, I completely empathize with people if that was the moment where they're just like, forget this, I am not into this movie, and just turn it right the hell off. But I was there, man. I'm there for the ride. And once I hear that song, that thing is stuck in my head for the rest of the day, if not for the rest of the week.
I agree. I do like that concept of no watches, just, you know, by the end of the song, we got to meet here. It's kind of cool. I like that whole sequence. I think it's really cool. And they both sing it well and they perform it well. It is a standout scene. And what's strange about it is that at the ending of that scene, when they're standing on the ledge and they're looking down, when you hear the security guard fire his gun, Danny-Aiello, for some reason, like, kind of like grabs his stomach like he's been shot, but he wasn't. It's just very odd. Like, Danny-Aiello like almost dies like 3 times, like I said earlier, and that's one of the times. It's very strange. And then when they jump and he lands in the chair, like going back to James's Siskel and Ebert review, they hated that scene. They just didn't understand it, that jump cut.
I also didn't like the fact that throughout the movie, people would jump out of windows, and instead of being killed, they would land in chairs, sitting next to somebody, would start talking to them. People turn up coincidentally, without any explanation, on 2 different continents, to the point where you're just sitting there feeling whoever made this movie was completely addled. There was just absolutely no window for the audience to get in through, to get into the story. Well, it's just, we're kept out of it.
You know enough about the history of movies to know what kind of a style they're going for. They're trying to do the Hope and Crosby routine. They're trying to do a little bit of Abbott and Costello, and they're trying to bring in all these kinds of things, and it's too much. It just doesn't work at all.
Yeah, and I guess like right there and then, that whole thing, if you're not in by that point, it's over. You're not going to get this film at all.
Well, what happened if Danny-Aiello really did die during that first robbery, and the rest of this is all just his fantasy?
It's like Bruce Willis in a very early version of The Sixth Sense. Like Danny-Aiello is the dead person the whole time.
Nobody else can see him. He is his Tyler Durden kind of thing.
Yeah, he's phenomenal in this film. Like Danny-Aiello just has this like one scene, like this one little monologue where he was like, I hated cigarettes until I saw my first no smoking sign. You know, keep off the grass. Let's play soccer. He just has this he's got these little great monologues, and he just delivers them so well. Like, I love him in this film.
I think he's really important to this movie. And he is very good. If for nothing else, that he kind of tempers Bruce Willis's kind of overbearing smirkiness in the scenes that they share. I mean, the scenes that they do share feel like they are shared, as opposed to some of the other group scenes among different actors.
Yeah, there's a point where Aiello disappears from the proceedings for a while. Like, we see him with the Mayflowers, but we don't really get any interaction. And I miss him. I miss him being in the proceedings, because I do like that chemistry that he and Willis have throughout this film.
I like the first car ride with him, and he picks him up, which starts the whole cappuccino thing. And which for me, this was the movie that introduced me to cappuccinos when I was a kid. You know, I wanted one so bad watching this film.
Listening to the audio commentary, Lehmann talks so much about setting up the cappuccinos because they were so afraid that nobody would know what a cappuccino was, and just that they really were like afraid of having the cappuccino in there, because it was just like, well, what if nobody really knows what that is? And what if this, because 1991, it was a whole different world when it came to designer coffee.
Well, and also the most advanced technology that they refer to from that time is Nintendo. Which is also something they bring up in that car conversation.
Which I also like, that the bad guys are the Mario Brothers, which is kind of nice. I almost wish that there was more of the video game kind of stuff, because it's appropriate. Steven, you were the one that posted the video game on my feed, right?
Yeah, there was an NES game that came with this that came out during this time of this film, and I was really into Nintendo back then. And if I would have known, I would have bought it. I didn't find out about it until years later. But after watching the gameplay, you're just pretty much throwing a baseball at like. You're trying to get the horse, and you're throwing baseballs at the security guards. I don't know. It doesn't look like the best game. You could actually go on YouTube right now and watch the long gameplay of the Hudson Hawk NES game. But that was very clever because there wasn't many movie tie-in games back then. There was only like a handful during the NES era.
So yeah, I think a lot of this stuff, as far as those things like that speech, I never wanted to smoke a cigarette till I saw a no smoking sign. Like, there are clunkers of lines, and there are some really good ones. For me, they hit more than they sink. And for me, a lot of that just has to do with the panache that they're delivered. But there are times where nothing can save a bad line, and even there are times where a line is so good that it goes beyond the performance. And I think that this movie kind of is all over the map as far as where that level is, as far as, is this a good line or is it a good performance? And most of the time, for me, it's a combination of both.
I'll tell you the truth, when I read the script, I finally understood some of the lines, because I think some of them went by really fast in the film, and I didn't grasp them at all. And then reading the script, I'm like, wow, that is a funny line. Or it is, some of the stuff Bruce Willis is talking is really complicated too. When he goes back and sees danny-aiello after Gates is killed by the butler, there's this line reading. It's just like,
took Mr. Ed, Humpty Dumpty it over Gates' head, and get this. He said it was made by Leonardo da Vinci's Sforza.
I consider it to be the prize of tonight's auction of Auger, the Equestrian.
I never caught that until I read the script and understood, oh, he bashed the statue of the horse over this guy's head. That's what I all mean. It's like some of the stuff is just spoken really fast, and I couldn't catch some of the dialogue until I read the script and could appreciate it a little bit more.
Yeah, I will say that I definitely found more to appreciate after having read the script. Rewatching the movie again just yesterday, I was like, okay, yeah, this clicks a little bit more. And especially having the whole little Eddie thing, definitely.
Dude, I'm obsessed with Little Eddie, man.
I fucking love it. I had no idea about Little Eddie.
I had to buy the novelization for a penny like last month because I needed to know more about this Little Eddie. It blew my freaking mind. Like, why isn't this in the film? This is brilliant. It adds a whole other dimension to the movie.
Well, let's not keep people in high suspense. I wanted to go ahead and take a break here and play an interview with the screenwriter Daniel Waters, who will explain in great detail the meaning of Little Eddie. We'll be back after this and a little bit of a break.
Let me ask you a question. Are you getting enough? I bet you'd love more, right? Well, andie-macdowell.com wants to give you more with 10 free gifts. First, you'll get a sexy surprise for her. Second, a specially selected toy for him. And third, a little something we know you'll both enjoy. Plus, you'll get 6 full-length adult movies on DVD. And number 10, free shipping on your entire order. So what do you have to do to get your 10 free gifts? It's not hard. Just go to andie-macdowell.com and select any one item. It could be an adventurous new toy, sexy piece of lingerie, or anything you desire. Just enter offer code BOOTH at checkout, and you'll get all 10 free gifts. Go check out andie-macdowell.com today. Select one item and get 10 free gifts, including free shipping when you enter offer code BOOTH. That's BOOTH at andie-macdowell.com.
Have you ever experienced uncontrollable bouts of geekdom? If so, the Anomaly podcast may be right for you. In clinical studies, Anomaly's interviews, convention reports, commentary on geek culture, games, sci-fi and fantasy television, literature, and film provided a feeling of fullness while promoting health for optimal geekiness. The Anomaly podcast is not suitable for all people. Only geekily active cool chicks with a healthy sense of humor should listen. Geekily active cool guys should listen too. Anomaly has resulted in sudden fits of squee. Broad smiles may appear without warning and could become permanent. The most common side effects of Anomaly are unconsciously joining in the Gamma Quadrant golf clap, out loud, at work, to the amusement of co-workers, and attempting to interject opinions aloud to hosts who can't hear the listener. But in all cases, the benefits outweigh the risks. Ask your Anomaly if you're healthy enough for entertainment of this caliber. You don't need a doctor's messy handwriting to obtain a free subscription. Anomaly is available over the counter at Stitcher Radio and in the iTunes, Zune, and BlackBerry stores. You can also stream episodes of Anomaly and Anomaly Supplemental at anomalypodcast.com. That's ANOMALY podcast.com. Just one 1-hour episode provides 24 hours of relief and never leaves a bad taste in your mouth.
When a grieving mother finds a way to bring back her dead son, it's not all that comes home.
Miss Mabel was discovered deceased inside one of the rooms. Her body was found upright in a rocking chair. Hudson had a figure made of sticks and leaves. Judging from initial reports, Miss Mabel had been dead a matter of months.
Based on the unsolved mystery of Olivia Mabel.
There were a lot of photos and personal objects on that, and candles and what we call santuarios.
You have no power over... Leave me alone! John, I need help!
A short film from Elf Tree Media.
Mommy.
Thoughtform. Support our Kickstarter campaign now through February 17th at thoughtformfilm.com.
Like, of all the movies that we've talked about, I still haven't talked to you really about Heathers that much, which is probably like...
Yeah, you know, who wants to talk about movies that were actually acclaimed in their time?
But I did kind of want to talk to you about that as far as how you and Michael Lehmann met and what your working relationship was on that, because I would imagine it plays right into Hudson Hawk.
It's funny. It's the difference between Dan Waters, the boy from Indiana who came to California, and Michael Lehmann, the USC graduate, and then for Heathers, and then for Hudson Hawk, it's, you know, we're working filmmakers at that point, and we're kind of already starting to become different people who thought they knew it all, and were proven wrong. You know, Heathers was an interesting experience in that, you know, I wrote, and you may have heard some of this before, but I wrote Heathers. You know, I always say it was the best thing that could have happened is how naive I was in that, you know, I moved to California and said, I'm just going to write a script, and I wrote Heathers while I worked at a video store long before the days of Tarantino. And, you know, my original goal was, let's make a teen film, just like Stanley Kubrick did a war film and a science fiction film and a horror film. This would be Stanley Kubrick's teen film. So I thought, like, perfect. You know, this is going to be his Kubrick, you know. And so I was obsessed with, like, I'll Stanley Kubrick, just let him read the script, and he'll know it's for him. And instead, like, when I moved out to California, it was with my, you know, I moved in with my best friend from high school, Larry Karaszewski, who's since gone on to become a screenwriter himself with Ed Wood and People vs. Larry Flint and what have you. And my other roommates all worked on this student film called The Beaver Gets a Boner, and its director was Michael Lehmann. And they passed on the script to Michael Lehmann, which, you know, kind of vaguely even behind my back, they gave it to him, and he starts calling me with his ideas and notes, and I'm looking at the phone like, who's this fucking guy? Like, you know, this isn't Stanley Kubrick. I don't hear a British accent or a Brooklyn accent. I mean, Brooklyn accent trying to be a British accent, but it's funny. It just kind of happened that, you know, I ended up with an agent that didn't get Heathers, so Michael Lehmann gave it to his agent, who did get it, and she also represented Denise Novi, the producer, and all of a sudden, a script that I had been taking meetings on, like, you know, it made quite a name for myself, that suddenly, but every time I'd have these meetings, people go, yeah, this is a great original script, like it's never going to get made. And then all of a sudden, just by doing it the low budget route, not giving it to Stanley Kubrick, not giving it to even Alan Parker, who's one of my second choices, we ended up making it. And Michael Lehmann was, I always say, oh, you want Stanley Kubrick, but then Michael Lehmann's the kind of guy who's going to get my tone as far as he'll understand the intellectual, satirical side of it, but he's also not above, my need for a good, cheap laugh. So, we got along great. And, Hudson Hawk was never, it was nothing I was interested in. He was doing Hudson Hawk long before I was. And, I had my experience with Ford Fairlane, which, had its joys and its downside, and okay, I did my Joel Silver movie, time to move on, and then all of a sudden Lehmann's now attached to Joel Silver, and he's got this script, and I read the script, and it was not great, and people like to make fun of Hudson Hawk because Bruce Willis is one of the writers, but Bruce Willis, all he really did was have an idea of a guy called Hudson Hawk who gets out of prison, and he's a burglar. And that's all he had, and and I never quite got it at all, and so I kind of we ended up doing our own crazy thing, and I ended up, my joke about Hudson Hawk is that if I hadn't been involved, it would be a movie like Striking Distance or Mercury Rising, a movie everyone would completely forget about it, and not remember anything about it. It took me to make it one of the worst movies ever made, in quotations. Whatever cult is developed around it, whatever strange passions have developed around it is also due to me. But I think, why people hate it is definitely due to me, too.
By you being involved, did that just suddenly raise expectations up to these two guys worked on Heathers, and how dare they create something that isn't Heathers?
Yeah, I should have thought about that a little more. Although I do think people were too busy hating the movie just because it was the time to hate Bruce Willis, who had gotten a little big for his britches. So I think most of the hatred went for that. But definitely, whoever could be disappointed by the fact that we did Heathers. They certainly were. It's so funny. You caused me to think about it this morning. And I was just like, God, I really, here's the funny thing, and I use this all the time. It's like when you genuinely don't want to do something, that's when they make you an offer you can't refuse. If you're playing hard to get, it's like and this goes for not just getting money from a studio, but I would think they tell you when you're going out with a girl to pretend not to be into her, and that's going to make her into her. I always find that a woman can see through that. But if you're genuinely not into them, then it really works. So anytime anybody says they don't want to do something, I say, okay, now if you genuinely don't want to do it, they're going to come back with more money. And so by the time I was done saying no 800 times, I couldn't. I had to say yes.
So you said that Michael Lehmann had been working on this for a while. Where was the project at, kind of, when you finally did say yes?
It was surprisingly the structure. Nothing with Rome or anything. I think there was one of Bruce Willis's best friends, Carmine, played one of the mafia guys. So there's a mafia element, and he wanted a best friend, he wanted a love interest. I think it ends up in a ranch, and there's a Texas billionaire is the villain. So there's vague structural similarities. I didn't start from scratch, but I did rewrite most of it. I should be saying, I just did 1 week of work. But again, whatever Hudson Hawkness there is about Hudson Hawk, again, there was an element of humor, but it was not crazy town the way the eventual script made. Not that you watch Hudson Hawk and say, that's an actual script that was typed up. It did. If you sat and watched the movie and typed it up, it would be very different than the finished screenplay. Not that my screenplay was a great structural, precise Swiss watch, but it, definitely. Again, the refrain, I'm to blame. I'm to blame, and if you like it, I'm also to what you like about it.
So it's credited to, well, as you already mentioned, Bruce Willis and Robert Kraft get a story by credit, but it's credited to you and Steve DeSouza. What was kind of the order as far as you guys working on it? Was he already attached, or did he come in later? How was that?
Oh, no, Steve DeSouza, he came in before me. And
okay.
And, and I know Steve, and he's a great guy, and, but it's funny, if you talk to Steve DeSouza about Die Hard, movie I to this day worship, and it's what got me in the Joel Silver business. It's so funny how much of that was written on the fly. Like, to me, that's a great script, but when he talks about it, it's like, it's so funny. Like, oh, hey, maybe if they turn the power off, that'll open the safe. Really? Yeah, let's do that. That sounds great. And which I thought was like, oh, I thought that was like a great thought out thing, but they came up with it on the set. And so it's like, but yeah, I think Steve was happy to, that it was kind of the script was kind of, there was a muddle to it of what they wanted the script to be, because it was like, God forbid Bruce was in a position then where he could basically do anything.
Right.
But, sometimes when you have that much freedom, it's hard to do when you can do everything, it's hard to do anything. So, and then I came aboard and I go, hey, this is, my problem to begin with is that I see too many movies. I see every movie that comes out, so I don't want to, it's my curse that I don't want to do things that I've seen before, so I end up doing something, original that may not, I always say originality over quality. I'm sure I've said this to you before, that, if you only talk to me about my Joel Silver movies, is that, I never met a tone I didn't like. And I feel like this is, again, a movie where I just wouldn't play by the, I'm always ahead of the curve in a bad way. As far as who wants to see another action movie? And I, subverted the action film before anybody wanted it subverted. That I think later on, when you have a all-out spoof like Austin Powers, people are ready for it and they get it. I always think this is a problem with my films, and that I think the normal film goer, and especially the critics, they're like the judges at the Olympics, where the diver needs to tell the judges what he's going to be diving. And so everybody can know going in, okay, this is going to be this kind of movie. Not that I would be able to tell people what this kind of movie was, but I certainly the sober ad campaign and what people expected from Bruce Willis did not lead. No one had an idea what was coming down the pike.
It does seem to have kind of a everything in the kitchen sink quality to it.
Yeah, that was a good thing. I always think the litmus test scene is when they rob the place to music, they have running times memorized, and the swinging on the stars scene, basically. There's so many critics that say, "What was that scene? That makes no sense whatsoever." And if that's your attitude toward that scene, you're gonna hate not just the scene, but you're gonna hate the movie. Well, when on the other hand, if you're okay, this is something new, this makes its own kind of weird sense, then there's a chance you might. You definitely like the scene. There's a chance you may even like the movie.
Well, yeah, and I like how that keeps coming back. People will mention another song or what could be a song title, and then Bruce Willis always has to say what the running time is.
So much I don't remember, but yes, that's true.
I have to say that I think my favorite parts of the movie involve the Mayflowers. Those two, Richard E. Grant and Sandra-Bernhard together, are just amazing.
Well, yeah, I looked at some of the reviews. I basically typed Hudson Hawk underrated and see what came up, and so but I think one critic said that they start the performances over the top and find a way to keep going even higher.
I don't know. Yeah, you're right. This was kind of the time to hate on Bruce Willis, and I don't know was he unscathed by the whole Bonfire-of-the-Vanities? Because that was the film that he did right before this.
Yeah, nobody, you're not doing a Bonfire-of-the-Vanities podcast. I mean, nobody, like some of these movies, like that's a true bad movie. It's not, no one got enjoyment from that movie. Well, he was disastrously miscast, but I think there was, again, a lot of things, even Tom Hanks made it out of that. I think that was just like, people just walked away from that. Like, I think De Palma had to take the hit for that one. When it's a hit, everyone gets credit for it. When it's a bomb, usually one person takes most of the hit.
So was this one of those films where you turn in the script and then you kind of walk away, or were you there on set all the time?
Nice? No, I mean, I say that, but I was there for a while. Like, but I got to go to New York and Rome and Budapest, and I got to, I mean, the movie did have a big budget, and I did get to enjoy the fruits of that, and that, staying in a hotel in New York, and we closed down the Brooklyn Bridge for 5 days to shoot that 15-second scene of him on the gurney on the Brooklyn Bridge. Walking across the Brooklyn Bridge in my socks, calling my mother on her birthday. So it was fun. And Rome, it's so funny because I now have, like, Rome is one of the great cities in the world, but it's been cursed for me because that's where we shot a lot of Hudson Hawk. And then I shot, my last disaster, Vampire Academy in London. So I'm ruining the major cities one by one.
The thing that I kept reading about Hudson Hawk when I went back and was looking at the reviews was just people are so offended by how much money it cost.
Yeah, now everything costs that much, even adjusted for inflation. The thing is, this is what drove me crazy about the movie is that, I did throw in everything in the kitchen sink. That is my fault. Yes, I take responsibility for it. But isn't somebody supposed to say, okay, now this is the script, now let's start to cut it down? And I would attempt to say, well, do we need to go to Rome? Do we need to go to Budapest? Do we? I mean, that was Moscow, but do we need to go to? And I was, do we need 12 villains? Can we cut out the mafia guys maybe, or the crooked parole officer? Can we go straight to the Mayflowers? And it was so funny how people, Bruce and everyone would find ways to defend the largesse of the movie, the craziness of the movie. Oh no, you need that because that's the people that connect the parole officer to the Mayflower. It's like, oh Jesus, all right. Well, I mean, we did the problem was it was an even crazier script in that, to me, the set piece of my script, the great scene of the movie was there's a scene where the third thingamabob that they have to get is in Moscow, and it's in a spinning safe, the spinning safe scene. Oh, my God, this is bringing back traumatic memories. So there's a spinning safe that keeps spinning with different doors, and on one side you have the CIA with high-tech tools, and then on the other side you have Bruce and Danny-Aiello with their low-tech tools trying to rob the same thing at the same time. And it was actually a very good sequence, and the production designer, Jack Dagovia, who did Die Hard, he did amazing shit, lots of drawings. And then this was the shooting script, and then as we started to go over budget and everything, Joel Silver calls me into his trailer one day and says, yeah, that scene, the spinning safe scene in the Kremlin? Yeah, I'm going to need you to rewrite it so it all takes place in andie-macdowell's apartment. So now, if you remember the scene in andie-macdowell's apartment, it's basically James-Coburn walking in saying, hey, we robbed the Louvre last night. That scene in Moscow? Yeah, not happening.
Yeah, the script is, because of course I tracked down one version of the script, and yeah, very different, and I couldn't believe it was 155 pages.
155? Well, we did get the script a little down, but...
Yeah, I was surprised that I think it clocks in now, the movie clocks in about an hour and 39 minutes, something like that.
No, really? Wow.
Yeah, I thought for sure that it would be longer than that, just because so much stuff happens in it.
Yeah, but it's I mean, you can't say it's not moving, and he keeps like going through stuff. God forbid we have wait for people to comprehend what's going on.
I couldn't believe the caliber of actors that were in this film.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we got a good cast. I mean, it was definitely a weird set. I mean, Sandra-Bernhard and Richard Grant, they were in their own little world, and they, you know, I don't know if they're just getting into character, but they were kind of mean. They were mean to all the little people around them. But and God forbid you gave them a suggestion of like how to do something, they would just completely go into sarcasm. Oh my God, I think this is going to be that's going to be the best idea anyone's ever given us for the movie, and then they just go off and giggle. And Dave Caruso was a funny thing because it was, you know, back when he thought it was going to stay on schedule, he stayed in character and he was completely silent throughout the entire shooting of the film, and he would only talk to me. He didn't want to talk to Michael or Bruce or the producers. So he would only, if he had any notes or thoughts, he would only tell them to me, but he would stay silent with everyone else. Then there just came a time where we're like crazy over budget, and he just got drunk with everybody else, just started talking to everybody. But he did try to keep it going for a while. The story that encapsulates Hudson Hawk to me is what me and Lehmann call the "Who's Got the Dick" story, and it's basically, there's a line in the movie, not the greatest line in the movie. I mean, you know, mildly clever at best, but where he's handcuffed and Sandra-Bernhard's barking away, and Bruce goes, I guess I know who wears the penis in this family. And so we go to shoot that scene, and you know, Bruce comes in, and instead of I guess I know who wears the penis in this family, he says, "Who's got the dick?" And Michael Lehmann is just like dripping sweat and just like, "Oh yeah, that's very funny, Bruce." But kind of, you know, it's kind of a play on who wears the pants in this family, and if you could just do one line like that, and the screen rolls the camera, "Who's got the dick?" And he did it like 8 times. "Who's got the dick?" Managed to throw us a courtesy take, you know, the 9th time around, and that's in the movie. But it was just kind of like, you know, for Bruce Willis, for Michael Lehmann, that's the shooting of the movie in a nutshell.
So do I even need to ask how difficult Bruce Willis was to work with?
I mean, again, I got a lot. You know, here's the sad thing is, like, I got, you know, that he genuinely wanted to make a good movie, and I think he enjoyed this. I think he enjoyed, you know, going back to his moonlighting persona a bit and getting to riff and getting to be funny. And, you know, he always asked me, like, "Hey, this is good, right?" Like, you know, and I go, yeah, I think it's really funny. And, you know, I just think, and, you know, and if you look at Bruce Willis after Hudson Hawk, he became a sphinx. Like Death Becomes Her maybe got to do a little, but, you know, I don't think the radioactivity of Hudson Hawk had actually hit yet, but then he just became a really kind of, got so serious, and not just the movies he chose, but, like, you know, just the way his persona off screen was very serious, and I just never think he went back to smiling again. I mean, what drives me nuts about the reaction movies, like, it was just such an unprecedented hatred. And, like, to me, like, you always think, why do they hate me more than anybody else? It's like, it's just me. But, you know, I can prove to you that this movie was hated more than other movies, and that, like, Bruce Willis was on James Lipton, you know, inside the Actors Studio. And then that guy will, like, you know, suck up to anything. Like, I mean, I've seen him do Martin Lawrence and, you know, have Martin Lawrence on and wax rhapsodic about Big Mama's House 2. So he goes through Bruce Willis's career and it's like, "Well, Bruce, Hudson Hawk, what happened?" Like, James Lipton, are you kidding me? You know, this is the first time I've ever heard him say something negative in the movie. And then Bruce is just uncomfortable. Yeah, we just nobody quite got it, did they? and then Roger Siskel and Ebert, you know, unprecedented. You know, like, this week we're going to be reviewing this for this. No matter how much they hate a movie, up to the top of the show, they just tell you what they're reviewing. My week comes out. We're going to be reviewing Backdraft, Thelma and Louise, and we're going to talk about what happened with Hudson Hawk. Like, really? And I still remember Janet Mansfield's New York Times review. Like I remember saying a prayer before I read the reviews on Friday morning. Then I opened up hers first, and it was like, this is one of the special ones. This is one of the ones that we're going to be talking about for a very long time. I thought, hey, okay, this is a pretty good start. But then it was not so good.
When did things start to turn around? I mean, because now I know if you go out and you Google, you'll see, what, 50-50 or maybe 60-40 still of hatred for the film, but there is that 40%.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I get more compliments and people coming up to me giving me compliments about this movie than any other movie. In that, that I think people now take it as a badge of honor. I always say it's the most unironically loved worst movie of all time. Like when people can say they like Showgirls or The Room, but there is a so bad it's good quality to it. They generally like this movie and they get angry when people don't get it. Like it was on TBS or something. They were showing Hudson Hawk and they had all these celebrities on. They were going to make fun of it during the commercials. And they had this one Hudson Hawk fan, this African American guy of all things, who knew I had, this demographic, and he just sucked the mirth out of the room because he would just talk about why this was a great movie, and Kathy Griffin was left helpless. Well, I always joke that, I would like to write another movie where people tell me how much they love it without saying the word actually. Like, I get a lot of people, both Hudson Hawk and Fort Fairlane and Devil Image-Man, where they're like, all the Mike White favorites, they're like, I actually really love that movie. Like, I actually thought that was really good. Like, good. It would be great if he just thought it was good, and it was a great movie. And, nobody has to, give me a caveat about Heathers. Like, we had to cut something from that script. Now, this is my favorite cut from the movie, and when I mean cut from the movie, I mean really cut. It was like all throughout the movie where, and this was kind of Bruce's idea, and I kind of ran with it, where he wanted a pet monkey. Little Eddie was the name of the monkey. So, but then, we finally do the budget, and we did cut some things through the budget, like, I'm like, Bruce, I'm sorry, the shooting's the schedule's tight that we can't just take time out for a monkey. So I go, well, what if the monkey was backstory? Oh my God, what a horrible suggestion. And so we created this character of a monkey that was killed. And like when Bruce Willis gets out of prison, there's this newspaper, Little Eddie killed. The front page is this mob hit in a restaurant. And it's like, what the fuck, they killed Little Eddie? I couldn't tell you, man. I had to wait till he got out of prison. Like, God damn it. And then and then he has these scenes with the mafia guys. Who killed Little Eddie? And then you find out James-Coburn admits to killing his monkey. And okay, this is the weird part. So James-Coburn gets killed, at the end of the movie, and he falls off. He oh my God, this movie. He dangles in the air before falling down on a car that goes off a castle cliff, if you vaguely remember. But the last close-up of James-Coburn in the movie, if you freeze frame it, go back and freeze frame it, he's got a picture of a monkey taped to his head because in the full version of the movie, Bruce Willis slapped the picture of the monkey on his forehead and said, "Say hello to Little Eddie, motherfucker," and then he kills him. But we couldn't, we couldn't take out the monkey on the head, so that's the last remaining point of Little Eddie. Which also reminds me of the fact that Bruce Willis, the first test screening, Bruce Willis wanted to try out everything. Like, why not just try out all the jokes? And so, we even have the mafia guy who had the syringes stabbed to his face. He comes back in Rome with the syringes still in his head. like the scene where everybody, like the we just robbed the scene loop. He comes back into that scene and gets blown up. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, who remembers this guy? And so anytime a friend of mine has a bad test screening, I have to tell them like about the Hudson Hawk test screening, which was 2.5 hours. And the best part is there was a woman in a wheelchair who tried to walk out. I mean, not literally, but like she turned her wheelchair around and she starts buzzing up the aisle, and she gets caught on like a wedge in the carpet. So she goes, and Jill said, "Will somebody just push that bitch out of here?"
Yeah, the script that I have still has little Eddie in his graduation cap in that photo. And I think that the last line of the film is, "Here's to little Eddie."
Oh, brother.
So, he was a big part of that.
Oh, geez, yeah. So, I mean, one of my favorite last lines of the movie, which I think Bruce made up, is, and if I ever wrote a book about Hudson Hawk, this would be the title. It's one of my favorite lines is, "That's probably what happened." Such a great way to describe Hudson Hawk.
Between killing that koala in Fort Fairlane and now little Eddie, do you have something against cute animals?
I don't. There is something, because there's so many movies that, well, now horror films will always kill the pet, at some point in the movie. But I find a lot of commercial movies will make a big deal about saving the pet. So, and of course now the big screenwriting book is called Save the Cat, and I've done, I think, 2 movies in a row where the cat gets killed. So that says something about my connection with the industry.
Was this the first movie you ever worked on that had a video game adaptation?
I believe so.
Did you ever play Hudson Hawk, the video game?
I tried to. I'm really bad at video games, so I had to watch somebody else play it, but I do remember that. God, that is funny. God, well, it's so funny. Thank God it wasn't the last movie I had a video game, but you asked if I stayed the whole way, I was going through I called it my failing upwards montage, where, oh my God, I gotta get rid of the shame of Fort Fairlane. Okay, I'll do this Bruce Willis movie. I gotta get rid of this Bruce Willis movie. So there were so many people getting fired in the movie. Like Marcia Detmers got fired, although they tell you it was a back injury. It was not a back injury. She got fired. And our DP, Jos Vagano, who shot RoboCop, was replaced by Dante Spinati. But I actually, got the offer to write Batman while we were shooting. So, and it's so funny. Everybody at the premiere just, acted like I was a rat who escaped a sinking ship. How dare you? But so I missed out, when it really got ugly. Apparently, that scene at the end where danny-aiello gets blown up, he got so angry about the way his hair was treated in that scene that he had a complete meltdown. And so I missed a lot of meltdowns, and it was still Bruce and Michael Lehmann were still polite to each other. But when not that I was keeping the peace, but when I left, David-Caruso started talking, it all went to hell.
Do you think Caruso was secretly to blame?
Well, now it's a easy theory. Everyone wants to blame Dave-Caruso. But Dave-Caruso was actually quite sweet at that time. It was pre-CSI.
Oh, I was asking kind of before, as far as when people started to come up to you and tell you that they liked Hudson Hawk.
It's funny. I remember being at a party, and Seth Green, of all people, said, "Wait a second. Are you the guy who wrote Hudson Hawk?" Yeah, I'm also the guy who wrote Heathers. Hey, keep it down. What are you trying to do to me? And it's kind of he said, "You understand, people love that movie. Everybody didn't get that movie as an asshole." But I'd say that was definitely over a year after the movie came out. It wasn't years and years, but it was after the damage had been done. I've done movies that are not good, like my last vampire movie. At least the vampire movie had a good premiere. The premiere for Hudson Hawk was one of just the sweatiest. I came on and said, "Is that a that an audience or a Da Vinci oil painting? Like, it was just so painful. And then there was a party afterwards, and it was like not, deck chairs of the Titanic. It was like after the Titanic had sunk, and we're just walking around, bubbles coming out of our mouth. It was very painful.
They really called you and Lehmann out so much in those reviews. Just the whole, these guys worked on Heathers, how dare they do this?
Well, I ended up really, because even Demolition Man, Kenneth Turan, his whole, review of Demolition Man was like, what happened to Daniel Waters? He was he could have been such a creative force, and now he's just an asshole, a smarmy asshole hired to punch up action movies. I'm just like, oh boy. And Kenneth Turan, he said Heathers was like calling Heathers a movie about high school is like calling Moby Dick a book about a fish. I mean, he was my fan. He was my buddy. But they turned on me. It's almost worse now, right now, than even when people because it was the 25th anniversary of Heathers, and so people would and they had such great things to say how the movie's held up and how it's become a culture icon. But then the last paragraph of these articles, Lehmann and Waters' careers went on to do Hudson Hawk, and they never captured the heights of Heathers. Oh brother, let's stop reading these last paragraphs.
If memory serves, 2016, that's got to be an anniversary for Hudson Hawk. You think things might...
Oh, yeah, everybody's going to be coming back. That's funny.
Get all the whole candy gang there, Kit Kat, Snickers, Almond Joy.
It's funny, Lorraine Toussaint, she's in Orange is the New Black, and she got... wasn't Selma, but Anna DuVernay's movie before that, Middle of Nowhere, where she got a Best Supporting Actress nomination for the Independent Spirit Awards, and I saw her at that ceremony, hey, Lorraine, I don't know if you remember me, but, we did. And she goes, what's there to complain about? I got to be in Rome, and it was awesome. It was a job.
Yeah, that seemed to be the other thing when they were talking about expenses, just like you had mentioned before, nobody toning down the amount of locations, because it was just like, this thing cost $51 million and they shot it in all these different countries. How dare they?
Yeah. Well, you notice they don't do I feel like movies are less cosmopolitan now. They'll shoot Rome and Vancouver, and Moscow, and let us do it all there.
Yeah, there's almost a real kind of throwback feel to Hudson Hawk. I mean, even though Hitchcock wouldn't shoot things, well, he did shoot globally, but he faked out a lot of it in the studio work. But it kind of reminds me of something like, To Catch a Thief, or even some of the more exotic stuff like. What am I blanking on here? Was it To Catch a Thief?
That's funny that you said To Catch a Thief, because they recently at the New Beverly Repertory Cinema down here, they had a double feature, To Catch a Thief and Hudson Hawk, and they had me speak, and I'm like, Jesus, really? Somewhere Alfred Hitchcock's rolling in his grave that you paired these two movies together. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it's funny. There was I think that the movie plays better now, not just because that smart Alec Tone plays a little better, but I think it just that it's the way you come across an old movie, that you forgive its flaws, and it's okay that you didn't know what it's about. I mean, I knew my problem was that even when we're shooting the movie, I always joke that Joel Silver would shout out at dailies, and he would always go, okay, I get this movie now. It's North by Northwest. Okay, I get this movie now. It's a Pink Panther movie. Okay, I get this movie now. It's like a Hope Crosby movie. It's like an old Hope Crosby movie. And the thing is, he'd always be right and wrong at the same time. That it's all those movies. And it's so funny because, you asked me when did I know, because, the tide turned, it wasn't just Seth Green at a party. It was, what I'm forgetting to tell you is it's Europe. that Europe can appreciate more than one tone. Like I always joke, I always say I was meant to be an Indian Bollywood filmmaker, because they have every tone in those movies, and they're all 3 hours. But everyone I would meet from Europe, visiting Europe, I had a friend from Denmark, and Denmark especially, like they would just come out with me with such reverence. Like, oh my God, you did Hudson Hawk? That's the greatest American movie of the last 10 years. Like, what? Sorry, what did you say? But just basically anyone from Europe, any country, people from France, people from Spain, and like Michael Lehmann had a meeting with Wolfgang Peterson where he said, Hudson Hawk, masterpiece. and so I would joke like, well, who dubbed Bruce Willis? Like who did the subtitles? Like somebody must have done an amazing job. Like. But I think it's because, and the thing is, if you do look at a lot of the Italian comedies and French comedies that don't get released here, you're like, oh boy, they're pretty bad. But they are jarring. Don't have to have, they are, they don't play by rules. They don't think. I mean, the thing is, sometimes as Americans, the American cinema's got it down so well. That they say, okay, we're going to make an action movie, so it's going to be exactly like this, and other countries don't, they don't have that white glove test.
Yeah, there are times, other than the lack of kung fu, there are times that I'm reminded of a lot of the Hong Kong films when I'm watching this, just because of that, the kind of shifts in tone and stuff, almost like like an Armor of God, or I'm trying to remember what the Chow Yun-fat Thief movie was, where there is that kind of wildness to it, the humor, and kind of the darker tones all mixed in.
I Am a Thief or something. Yeah, no, the Once a Thief or something like that. Once a Thief. Thank you. Boy, I'm glad you remember that one. Because that did make me feel. I'd actually already done Hudson Hawk before I saw Once a Thief, but when I did see Once a Thief, it was like, hey, look, they can do it. Oh brother, it's so funny because even to this day, TriStar doesn't make as many movies now, as I like to say. I gave a lot of studio executives independent production deals because I got them fired. But even to this day, when I hear that TriStar theme music, it's like Pavlovian. I just break into a cold sweat.
What are you working on these days?
I've been, this year I took off to write a novel, which I don't know what's gonna. Now I think of this novel as kind of a space program into Mars, where I may not make it to Mars, but I now have split this novel off into 3 separate screenplays that I'm trying to do. But me and Michael Lehmann are actually together again, and we've been getting this TV series together, which I've already written the pilot of, and we're getting producers and going out and pitching it right now. And it's basically if Mork and Mindy and Third Rock of the Sun was done as a kind of multi-toned 1-hour HBO kind of thing, not a goofy half-hour comedy, but played very straight. Not very, as straight as Dan Waters and Michael Lehmann can do, which is not that straight, but...
I'm sure I told you the story, kind of shifting gears a little bit. I'm sure I've told you that I actually saw Demolition Man twice in the theater the day it came out, right?
Oh, we did tell me you saw it multiple times. I didn't know it was the same day. Only Manhunter have I done the same day, 2 viewings in the exact same day.
Yeah, I was working at a movie theater at the time, and I went to see the first show of the day on that Friday, and then I liked it so much that I took my ex-wife to see it that evening.
Yeah, I hope that's how I made her ex-wife. We were married in the first show.
Because with that one, and I won't belabor this, because hopefully one of these days I will do a Demolition Man show.
You've done a Demolition Man show.
No, I haven't done. I've only done Free Jack. I haven't done Demolition Man.
Free Jack. You mean Ford Fairlane?
I've done Ford Fairlane. Yeah.
I didn't have nothing to do with Free Jack. You can't pin that one on me. You haven't done Demolition Man? I swear to God I've done. Well, you would know, but I swear to God I've done Demolition. I swear to God we've done more than one of these together.
Oh, yeah, we did. Well, we did Batman Returns.
Oh, my God, you're right. Okay. Oh, well, Demolition Man's a hoot because unlike Hudson Hawk, actually, it is Hudson Hawk, and then I mean, if you can believe it, if you look at the poster for Demolition Man, like I'm the first, I'm not the story credit, but I'm the first credited screenwriter. And I wrote that my contribution to Demolition Man was done mostly standing in line for one of Johnny Carson's last shows, where I had to stand in line for 20 hours, and I wrote most of Demolition Man while standing in line. But then I really only worked on the movie 2 weeks. But I did change it from being, like an action movie to more of a comic action movie. I get called in to, as a veterinarian to fix an action movie rhinoceros, and my solution is to put the head of a giraffe on it. If you like unusual animals, a rhinoceros, a giraffe head, you're going to say this is amazing. But if you just want a rhinoceros, you're going to say, who fucked up this rhinoceros?
Well, I will. I'll save any more questions for another time when we do.
I thought we had. Well, yeah, definitely. That's a whole other story. And what's your favorite line from Hudson Hawk? Can I ask?
From Hudson Hawk? Oh, geez. The first time I wanted a cigarette was when I saw a no smoking sign.
Oh my God! Wow. That's funny. Nobody mentions that one because I like most people I know are obsessed by the line. Looks like you won't be attending that hat convention in July.
I love that guy with those blades, and then I'm like watching that going, wait, did Mike Mignola see this for the characters from Hellboy? Because there's that guy with the two swords in Hellboy.
Well, that guy, Donald Burton, whatever happened to him, I have no idea. But so he shows up at the premiere with his wife, and we're walking down the carpet, and people started yelling his wife's name, and it's just like I realized I've been standing next to Carol Baker, the actress, and he was married to Carol Baker. Very weird.
That's probably my first one, and then, of course, the other one is the one that I posted on Facebook earlier today about the if Da Vinci were alive today.
Oh, my. Oh, no. I gotta go.
All right, we are back, and we were talking about Hudson Hawk, Little Eddie, the mystery revealed. I was trying to explain Little Eddie to my wife while we were watching the movie again yesterday, and I'm like, you see that thing? You see that on his hat? You see that on James Coburn's hat? That's Little Eddie. I love that Little Eddie had the last line of the screenplay, the whole, here's the Little Eddie.
That's the last toast of the film.
Ah, so good. That's what he would have toasted with his cappuccino.
Oh, that's true. And I think, actually, his one-liner when he kills James Coburn is a one-liner about Little Eddie. I was just explaining this to my wife. When you're watching a film and you cut to a scene where a group of people and you hear the ending of a joke and everyone laughs, but you have no idea what the joke is. In Hudson Hawk, that's how one of the scenes begins, is a joke about Little Eddie. The whole, so we go into this hotel room and we open the door and we see Little Eddie in bed with this little monkey hooker. That monkey had a look on his face when he got caught that I've never seen on any human. It's like, what? The line is, when he kills James Coburn, is, say hello to Little Eddie, motherfucker.
Did you guys get a chance to watch that video from 2005 where it was the songwriter, because this movie has a story credit to what's his name, Robert Kraft, I think it is, and Bruce Willis. They came up with a story based upon the song, the Hudson Hawk song, And there's an amazing 3-part video out on YouTube where they're explaining how these two guys got together, what they're, what they hang out and all this kind of stuff, explaining how the song got written and talking about their days back in Jersey and New York in the early 80s. Did you guys get to see that?
It's like a 30-minute clip, 15 minutes of which are them kind of scatting by the piano together.
Yes, that should be an extra on the DVD.
Oh, it isn't?
I don't know where it came from.
Oh, God, it's beautiful in many ways.
Bruce Willis is just so disappointed still that Hudson Hawk was not the film that he thought it was going to be.
Yeah, no, it must be hard because it's, it's like, in one way he should be thankful. It's like him and his friend made this, dream project. Not many people get to make their dream projects. And there's people like us that respect it and actually are that enjoyed it for what it is. We got it and it's great. Just unfortunately, he was on such a high at that time with those diehards. He just wanted to do something different, and that could be really punishing to an artist when it misses. And yeah, you could really see it in his voice, and the whole demeanor there. It is quite sad because he probably had so much writing on this film, and not only that, when you read those reviews, man, not only the critics rip the movie apart, they're brutalizing Bruce Willis. They are taking it out on him. And it's like, he's an artist. He tried something.
It's an interesting video piece because, at one point, his cohort, he makes an observation. He says, you're amazing that you kind of let it roll off your back this whole period of time, that they were crucifying you for it. And then Bruce Willis, as humble as Bruce Willis can get, I thought it was nice that he said, I was sad that the movie wasn't better received because I thought there were some really good supporting performances in that needed some recognition.
I sometimes wonder, because this was 1991 that Hudson Hawk came out, and in between he was in Mortal Thoughts, which was definitely a different turn for him, and I know some people really kind of chafed at the whole idea of him in Mortal Thoughts, but right before that was Bonfire-of-the-Vanities in 90, and I don't think that Bruce Willis got as lambasted for Bonfire-of-the-Vanities as other actors did. I know that, obviously Tom Hanks has survived and gone on, but I know Melanie Griffith just got raked over the coals for that, and Brian De Palma raked over the coals for that. But I don't think Bruce Willis got as much mud flung on him as some of the other people, and I sometimes wonder if they were holding back and waiting, and this was the film that they just covered in mud and just completely tore apart, because it feels excessive how much hatred was thrust upon Hudson Hawk.
Yeah, and it's a shame. Bonfire-of-the-Vanities was one of the great notorious flops. He didn't really want that on his resume, so maybe he thought Hudson Hawk would be his salvation from that in a way, which makes it doubly kind of tragic for him. But you see that culturally now, where the only thing we like more than building someone up is tearing them down again. And I did think that so much of that was just terribly uncalled for. But that being said, Hudson Hawk is the kind of movie during that period of time that a studio would only make with a star they can't afford to say no to. It really is kind of a vanity project in that way. And I don't think that movies operate the same way with stars nowadays as they did in the 90s. I don't think they have the same kind of currency that they once did. And maybe partly because of movies like Hudson Hawk.
Yeah, I think if you have enough Hudson Hawks or Battlefield Earths, those kind of things, you're going to want to stay away from that kind of stuff. But at the same time, this was such a period of Hollywood excess. This is a Joel Silver movie, and Joel Silver has basically become synonymous, for better or for worse, with excess. And he made so many great films, and yet I think a lot of people just remember him for the expensive movies that failed. Whereas, I think there's even a quote in one of the reviews that I was reading where he's like, listen, I've made over $1 billion in revenue with the movies that I've made. I don't care if this one particular film cost $51 million. It's just, yeah, okay. Other films of Joel Silver's that have quote unquote flopped, Hudsucker Proxy. Hudsucker Proxy to me is still one of the Coen brothers' best films. I love that fucking movie, but because it was a Joel Silver movie, because they, he spent the money that they really shouldn't have spent on that film, it's still, considered a flop. And there are so many other films that he did where it was just like they couldn't get past the Joel Silver effect, which is just a strange thing.
And he should be given credit for something like Hudsucker Proxy, because that is not a safe project.
No, that's not the third Die Hard film. That's not the second Last Boy Scout film. That's not something that, you can rely on. This is taking a chance on these two brothers who have made pretty much nothing but art films. There's nothing on the Coen brothers resume that says this is going to be a balls out action type film or make billions of dollars at the box office. Bravo to him for that kind of stuff.
For me, as a kid in the 80s growing up, he was such a, it was like horror movies and action movies. That's all I grew up watching. And I didn't know at the time he was producing all my favorite films, It's like, from like Weird Science, Commando, like Action Jackson was the first R-rated ticket I ever bought a ticket for when I was a kid, and I was not 17 at all. It's just like he produced Predator. Like he produced some of the best action movies. He produced some of the best films of the 80s, and one flop, and of course they're gonna just tear into him. And it's just, it really sucks how critics sometimes can just really want to take
the Lethal Weapon movies alone. Weapon alone, it was such an accomplishment. I mean, he was in a period he was in the superstar producer period, which was something quite new at that time. I mean, around the Don Simpson Bruckheimer period.
Yeah.
When he really came to prominence. And he defined, alongside those other two producers, he defined the decade, really. The late 80s to the kind of the early to mid 90s.
Well, that also brings to mind the question of, were critics laying in wait for Joel Silver as far as like this was his first flop, at least in a long time? I mean, looking at the big one that Willis was coming off of with this was Die Hard 2, which was another Joel Silver film after having made Die Hard and everything. Was this, obviously this wasn't Joel Silver's first flop, but was this to the point where it's like, oh, now we have this guy. Now he made, this horrible movie, and Bruce Willis, this big star, really fumbled on this and made this vanity project. And it was just like, it almost felt gleeful the way that certain critics were going after this film. It was just like, it was to the point where it was like Waterworld kind of stuff, where people are just like going crazy about the budget and about the locations and stuff. And yeah, I brought up earlier that maybe they didn't need to use so many locations. And I know that there were problems with some of the locations as far as like that whole stealing of Da Vinci's model, gyrocopter and everything. There was a huge scene that was supposed to happen there, and it was all supposed to take place in Russia, and there was all this kind of stuff, as opposed to the Louvre in Paris. But it's supposed to take place in Russia and have all this stuff going on in a spinning safe and all this kind of stuff. But they pulled all that stuff back. They had already settled on shooting stuff in Budapest, and apparently they had to truck all of these sets over from England because they couldn't rent a soundstage in England for cheaper than they could in Budapest. But then with the production, the cost of transporting all this stuff and rebuilding it in Hungary, it ended up costing, I think, more than it would have had they done it in London, which was just kind of a strange thing. But, it was that whole idea of I think during this time is where the whole idea of using Eastern Europe for different locations and everything was really kind of starting to happen. The wall fell, and the Soviet Union was kind of getting out of the picture in the late 80s and everything. So now it was kind of like this field day of let's make cheaper movies in Eastern Europe. And this one was one of those first ones, though it was a failure as far as the use of the economics and everything. But again, it's just like, people were just harping on that so much. It was like, oh my God, they shot in Los Angeles, they shot in Rome, they shot in Hungary, they shot in London, they shot here, shot there. And it was like, is that really that important? It felt like people had put their little accountant's hats on rather than, writing a real film review.
Well, first of all, Joel Silver never made meager, unassuming movies. I mean, his movies were go big or go home. For the most part, he had an amazing track record. So it's not like he was, hiding WMDs or something. I mean, you have to have some perspective on this thing.
Going back to the piano piece with Bruce Willis and Kraft, Bruce Willis, I think, spoke there that he kind of wanted it to be, one of the ideas was like, what could have been one of the backstories to James Bond? And, that's what they were kind of making, is a Bond film going to all these countries. And I guess also with Joel Silver, I mean, going back to the budget, every single review that every single review that you read of this film, they bring up the budget. Right. Every time they bring it up, to tell the audience, like, this is how much this movie costs, and they didn't get it, and one review says to avoid it, and another review, like, I think it says James Coburn, who has more style in one of his huge teeth than Willis has in his entire being. And it's just like, whoa, it's like they're ripping on the budget, they're ripping on Willis, and yeah, they're just tearing this thing apart. Like this was, it's really brutal. Not only that, I remember when I was a kid, before I rented this, there was an episode of Herman's Head I was watching, and there was just this scene when I forgot, who was it? Williams Ragdale plays Herman in Herman's Head, that TV show, and Hank Azaria was his best friend, and he comes home drunk, and Hank Azaria is like, I know you're drunk, Herman, but did you really have to stop at a video store and rent Hudson Hawk? And got a big laugh from the laugh track. So this movie was really like just beaten, just being beaten, like making its way to Herman's Head as a joke.
And there was also
you've hit the bottom of the barrel there.
There was also some kind of feeling that Bruce Willis should have been more responsible with the budget. Like it was Bruce Willis's doing, that he should have been the film's accountant. And, it was, and I don't know how much of it might be true, but, they just worked to satisfy his every whim, and that's why it got so out of control. So they blamed everything on Bruce Willis. I mean, and I'm interested in, you said that Michael Lehmann kind of holds no ill will towards that whole experience. That had to have been a great blow for him, because here he is coming off of Heathers, which promises this great, biting, subversive new director on the horizon, and he's got a big studio movie, and I mean that had to have had kind of resounding effects. He did Heathers, which was, we're probably all fans of, and then he did like another cool film I read about in Cinefantastique, and it took a while for it to come out. It was called Meet the Applegates, or I think it was released as The Applegates, and it's a really... I was like, again, watching it as a teenager, it was a great film about this suburban family that are really insects from another planet. And it's R-rated, there's prosthetics, and it has that like Edward Scissorhands suburbia look, but underneath there are these like hideous insect creatures, like looking like regular suburban people. And it was a fantastic film. And that movie didn't even gross $1 million when it came out. And so he was coming off of a big bomb with that when this came out. Yeah, it must have been a blow, because I think this is the biggest budget he's had. And he made some independent movies after this that did really well, though. Yeah, and I saw that, I saw that he was directing episodes of True Blood during his last season, too, which were, I wasn't a huge fan of the show, but some of the best directed episodes. Like there were single camera setups that, just by the nature of his choreography, were very funny. I mean, they were funny because of the way they were directed. He's got so much talent. So I mean, I it's a pity that this movie might have hindered his potential in some way, his opportunities.
Yeah, I agree. Especially if you see the Applegates, you watch Heathers, and then you watch this, and and some of the set pieces are just fantastic. It does suck. We couldn't really see what else he could have really done after this, but he did. I guess he did that one independent movie, The Truth About Cats and Dogs, and that played for an entire summer during that whole '90s independent boom we had. That made a lot of money, and I think he had another hit after that, but. Those were, but you don't see his aesthetic in those films. They're something totally different than his earlier works, that he could have been another like Tim Burton or something if we would have got to see what else he had in him, because those first 3 films are really unique.
I don't know. I really like Airheads, which he also did. And, actually I just was quoting from Airheads just recently because my wife was asking me who Lemmy is. And I was just like, well, he's in Airheads. Don't you remember that? The Lemmy's God. And no.
I remember I went to see Forrest Gump, me and my friend. And Forrest Gump depressed us so much when we left the theater that we turned back to the box office and we bought tickets to Airheads because we just needed to see something to cheer us up. And I really liked it too. I'll never forget. I was like, I can't go home like this. I'm so depressed. Let's go. And I didn't realize he directed that, to tell you the truth.
Well, yeah, you don't get too many movies with Adam Sandler and Steve Buscemi in them these days that are actually good.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't know. I haven't heard any interviews with him where he's expressed this. But on Hudson Hawk, was there a dynamic where he was almost relegated to co-director because he was working at the wishes of Bruce Willis? Did you feel did he feel in any way that he was in a compromised position in terms of his authority as a director on Hudson Hawk?
He definitely doesn't say anything in the audio commentary. He is consummate professional when it comes to that, which I really admire. Mm-hmm. And, kind of like the same thing with Bruce Willis, the whole idea of him saying that, he wishes that some of the co-stars had gotten recognition for some of these great performances. That's pretty classy. And Bruce Willis could have been just a real douchebag about the whole thing if he wanted to, because he could have been like, oh, this was my project and, everybody screwed it up and nobody understands me or anything. And you get a little bit of that in that, piece that he did with Kraft. But for the most part, he's pretty much a class act.
Even when you read that Richard E. Grant diary,
yes,
it seems like Richard E. Grant liked him. He seems like every single time he saw Bruce Willis, he was in a great mood and was always very nice to him and, very supportive all the time. It seems like when I read those diaries, it seems like he was just being positive and trying, and he was always in a good mood and, he was having a good time, but it's hard making a movie and it's hard when it goes long and you start spending more money and everything. But it looked like he had some good spirits.
There's that book called Fiasco, and I have to say that Hudson Hawk, for as much of a bomb that it was when it came out and as nefarious as it was, becoming a punchline, a laugh line on Herman's head and everything, it wasn't a fiasco. It doesn't sound like there was probably some hard feelings going on at the time, and I can see there was probably some tension because of the budget and because of, Bruce Willis wanting this to be his project and everything. But I don't think it was nearly as bad as I've read other projects having been. Having read The Devil's Candy, it doesn't seem like The Devil's Candy. It does not seem like Bonfire-of-the-Vanities. It doesn't seem like Heaven's Gate.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like even the feuding of Kevin Reynolds and Kevin Costner on Waterworld. It feels like, there were some problems, but it wasn't this epic of badness like some other films.
Well, its greatest sin, Hudson Hawk's greatest sin, is that it bombed. It's not the budget of the movie. It's the fact that it didn't perform as well as they wanted it to. If you remember the lead up to Apocalypse Now or Titanic, everything was about, this is taking so long, the budget's skyrocketing, this movie is going to be a disaster. But once they make money, everything's forgiven, and nobody even mentions the budget.
Though, Titanic will never make back its money, apparently, or something. What?
I went back, because I don't know, I'm obsessed with box office, so I went back and I looked at, how it did in its first month and what it came out against. And it looks like it came out the same weekend as Backdraft and Thelma and Louise. And so the opening weekend, it came in third and made $7 million. Backdraft was first, What About Bob was second. And then second week, it went from third all the way to sixth place, only making $3 million. And then third week, it was in ninth place, made $1.4 million. And by the fourth week, it was in 14th place and made like $600,000. And Home Alone, that was out for 31 weeks, was in 10th place. So, it was going up against Backdraft, City Slickers, Robin Hood, What About Bob? It's Thelma and Louise, which was like a sleeper, So it was up against some tough competition, and it came out right in May during that whole, maybe if it came out in August, I mean, it still got ripped apart. Maybe it would have done better. Like, I don't know. But I just guess audiences didn't get it. Maybe that's why it dropped so fast. Like, that dropped really fast.
As you're reading out all these titles, I'm just like, yep, saw that in the theater. Yep, saw that in the theater. It's like all of those, except for Home Alone, which I probably saw the beginning and ending of a couple hundred times because it was playing at the movie theater where I was working. Otherwise, I saw all of those things in the theater except for Hudson Hawk. There's definitely something to be said about that. And I don't know if I can't remember if it played the theater where I worked at or not. It seems like I saw everything that was playing there, but for some reason I didn't see Hudson Hawk, and maybe it was just that whole stay away, this is a bomb kind of thing.
Yeah. I think that was the general consensus. I think that was in the air before the movie even came out. I mean, I remember we opened the theater because I was managing the theater at the time. We opened it in a smaller house opening weekend, and there was barely anyone there. Meanwhile, something like Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, I mean, that was still playing in the theater when it came out on video.
Yeah, I mean, like you were saying, Stephen, the Home Alone, that opened up in our biggest theater and then moved to one of the medium-sized ones. And yeah, that was still playing in the summer, which was crazy because that was a Christmas release and people were still going to see it. It was kind of like Hunt for Red October was one of the weirdest box office things that I ever saw, where it like opened to the biggest theater, moved to one of the medium-sized theaters, moved to the small theater, and then all of a sudden had this resurgence, and we had to put it back in the biggest theater again, which was just unheard of.
That's insane. Those are the days when movies could do that. I remember Batman played like the entire summer almost to its VHS release.
Well, yeah, I mean, these days, if Hudson Hawk opened, it would be gone by that second weekend. You get the one weekend, and if it doesn't perform, man, it is just right out of there.
It would be direct to VOD. That's where Hudson Hawk would end up.
Unfortunately, that's where a lot of Bruce Willis stuff is these days. It's all going to VOD. I keep seeing these movies where I'm just like, wait a second, I don't remember that coming out. Wait a second, what's this thing? What's that thing? Like, just I'm trying to remember what the last one that I caught on, like VOD kind of thing. Like, was it Cold Lighted Day or
Vice or something like that?
Yeah, there are so many movies that I just keep running across where it's like, Bruce Willis is starring in this, and it's like, when did this thing come out? Oh, it never did. Oh, okay, that's a surprise. He still makes some good movies. I really like the Red series. I didn't care for the last Die Hard, though. I got to tell you that.
Yeah, the last two weren't very good.
But I'll say Looper. I still think Looper was one of the best movies of that year.
Yeah.
Looper's fantastic. And then, I'm cheating. I'm looking at his IMDb. He did end up also in Moonrise Kingdom, which is he can come back and do real roles and then do G.I. Joe. He's versatile, which is very but not every actor could still. He's still. I mean, think about all the actors that were around in the '80s and how many of them are still acting. He still does VOD, but he still does feature films.
And by the way, I mean that was his kind of that was the trek his career was taking from the beginning. I mean, right after Hudson Hawk, he does a part in Billy Bathgate. He did Nobody's Fool, and then the third Die Hard. I think he's been in Country. He did that film. He's been very good at going back and forth between the wannabe big budget action epics and the smaller independents.
Yeah, that's right. And I forgot. He was in, Death Becomes Her also, which is a comedy. And I freaking love The Last Boy Scout. I fucking...
Oh, yes.
That is a line-per-minute movie that's just, it's fantastic.
Last Boy Scout, they definitely send up a lot of these action movie things, but it's within an action movie. The whole, the speech that he gives Damon Wayans at the end, as far as, if you hit somebody with a surfboard, you have to say something clever, like, surf's up, pal. And that is, so, Hudson Hawk was sending up so many things, but it's just I don't think people necessarily realized what a lampoon it was, and I think it would take, quite a few years, I think you mentioned, James, the whole idea of young James Bond kind of thing, or what happened before James Bond was James Bond, kind of going the opposite way of a over-the-hill James Bond, or a James Bond who's gone to seed. I see a lot of parallels between Hudson Hawk and an Austin Powers, where you get the whole idea of the spy genre being set up and everything, sent up, but in that one it is much more telegraphed to the audience what's supposed to be funny and when they're supposed to laugh. Whereas I think a lot of people are just kind of left scratching their heads when it comes to Hudson Hawk, because it's kind of in that action mode, but also in that comedy mode. And I think a lot of times when you cross those genre lines, people just freak the fuck out.
Yeah, it would be nice. It would be interesting if Bruce Willis would do, and maybe he has, and it's just not occurring to me, but if he could do kind of a not necessarily a parody, but some kind of takeoff on his own persona as an aging action star. I mean, something along the lines of what Dustin Hoffman did in Tootsie, which was a takeoff on the really demanding, impossible actor, which he was. I mean, it would have been nice if there was that level of self-consciousness and kind of being able to laugh at himself in that way. And, Hudson Hawk could have benefited from that, but I think that was probably a little too early in his career to do that.
Yeah, he could do for a JCVD.
Yeah, he could be funny. He's action. He's played it all, if you think about it. He was like a villain in Miami Vice back in the day, too, I believe.
Yeah, I saw that on his CV, and I was just like, oh, yeah, I forgot all about that. And I will say I was a fucking huge fan of Moonlighting. Moonlighting was one of those shows that I memorized while I was watching it, and a few years ago, I caught some reruns on Bravo or something, and I was just saying the lines with them as they were saying them, and I'm just yeah, I haven't seen this show since it was first on, but yet I remember all of these lines. And that's a testament to great writing and great acting, and it was just wonderful to be able to revisit those and just remember how great they were.
You know what, though? Now that I'm thinking about it, and you mentioned Moonlighting, a movie that I absolutely adore, it's always been one of my favorite movies from the 80s, is Clean and Sober, the Michael Keaton movie, which was directed by Glenn Gordon Caron, who created Moonlighting. And I remember interviewing Glenn Gordon Caron, and he did say that he was just finishing Moonlighting when he was embarking on Clean and Sober, and Bruce Willis really wanted that lead part. Essentially, Glenn Gordon Caron said, "There's no way I'm going to work with Bruce Willis again."
Right.
So he had a reputation for being difficult even back at the very beginning of his career when it first started to take off.
Yeah, they really kind of screwed the pooch when it came to Moonlighting. That last season and a half, when Willis's career was taking off, and he just really didn't have time for it. And those last couple seasons just became, well, they were a joke in some regards. They would actually make fun of themselves as far as how few episodes there were and how bad that they were.
While citizens all across the world settled into easy chairs, hoping to see another new episode of Moonlighting, news broke of one star's pregnancy and the other's unfortunate luck on the icy slopes of Idaho.
But it was a real disservice to the fans, and it was a real just bad time if you were a Moonlighting fan.
I only saw a couple of episodes, but the only couple episodes I saw were the Mark Harmon episodes. Because everyone was talking about it. So was that what time period was that in?
Was he Sam the astronaut? God, I forget.
It was a big deal, and that's when I watched it for a little while. But the humor of that show, is is this similar to Hudson Hawk?
Some of it is, yeah.
We're looking for a man with a mole on his nose.
Mole on his nose?
A mole on his nose.
What kind of clothes?
What kind of clothes?
What kind of clothes do you suppose?
What kind of clothes do I suppose would be worn by a man with a mole on his nose? Who knows?
Did I bother to disclose this man that we're seeking with a mole on his nose? I'm not sure of his clothes or anything else, except he's Chinese. A big clue by itself.
How do you do that?
Gotta read a lot of Dr. Seuss.
That was a big show. So again, I guess it was just the advertising of the film, because that was a whole built-in audience already with comedy. Because when he did Die Hard, that was one of the things. It was like he never did a film like that before. And that was one of the reasons why I didn't really rush to go see it, because I was used to Rambo, Commando, shirtless guys, big muscle dudes taking out arsenals of bad guys. When it came to Bruce Willis, the guy from Moonlighting in a tank top, I didn't think it was going to be good. That's why I went to go see the Deadpool instead, because I thought that was going to be badass. And then little did I know that this other movie was going to fucking blow my mind. And so, he had a lot to, I think Die Hard was a pretty big deal for him.
I think more than any other, most other movies, maybe any other movie, Die Hard really set the standard for a redefinition of an action movie. Because all of a sudden the action movies weren't about the impenetrable hero like a Schwarzenegger or Stallone. Bruce Willis made it an everyman genre with Die Hard. And I think that was seismic.
Yeah, I totally agree, because there were times in the 80s where some of these action heroes were almost too big for their britches. Like looking at, and I love the original Total Recall, and I just really don't like the remake at all. But the one thing I had about Total Recall, the Verhoeven version, was I always thought, what would have been like had they cast someone who looked more innocuous in that role? What would have been like if they had cast somebody like a Tom Hanks or somebody in that role, where you don't think there's any way in hell that he's this secret agent who was on Mars for all these years and stuff, whereas you look at Arnold Schwarzenegger and you're just like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, I could totally buy that. This guy, yeah, he was a secret agent. He's this kick-ass action hero and stuff. So it's no big surprise when he shoots somebody and he looks at the gun and he's just like, oh, wow, I didn't know I knew how to shoot. Whereas if you had taken like a normal guy, quote unquote, and thrown him in that role, I think that would have been a real big surprise had we found out, oh, yeah, he does have this backstory and it's, he was this real kick-ass guy. Fast forward so many years where you have Colin Farrell in this role and he looks more like a normal person, but I just don't give a shit.
Before Schwarzenegger, when it was supposed to, it was supposed to be like Richard Dreyfuss in the role, they wanted for a moment. And I forgot who the director was at that moment. I don't think that was the Cronenberg version, but
there were so many people attached to that movie for so long.
Yeah, and I think William Hurt was one of them too. So I'm happy without that one. But wow. It was been interesting to see.
Richard Dreyfuss at Total Recall. Get your ass to Mars. It's I can't imagine.
Consider that a divorce. All right, guys, let's take another break and play trailer for next week's show.
I want it. You probably think I'm beautiful, Dr. Roberts, but I'm not.
I want it.
My nose is 0.2 millimeters too narrow. And my cheekbones are 0.4 millimeters too high.
I want it, too.
I do television commercials. They want a certain look.
I did surgery on several girls a few months back, commercial actresses. And there have been some suicides.
You don't know what's going on. This is more than commercials. They're killing all the girls that are perfect.
DMI measured some girls for possible surgery. We were conducting an experiment.
Hi, I'm Cindy. I'm the perfect female type, 18 to 25.
Here you see a typical computer model being made.
Hi, I'm Cindy. I'm the perfect female type, 18 to 25.
What have you got me mixed up in? I have a right to know if somebody's trying to kill me.
That's right, we are back next week with even more evil James Coburn. We'll be talking about Michael Crichton's Looker with Heather Drain and Marjorie Conrad. Before we go, I want to thank this week's special guest co-hosts Jamey Duvall and Steven Scarlata. Jamey, what have you been up to lately over at Movie Geeks United, sir?
Well, we're just closing off our Art of the Documentary series, which was the month-long series with about 30 interviews with documentary filmmakers. And throughout the month of February, it's Oscar month. So we'll be hopefully interviewing quite a few nominees, as many as are willing to come on our show, which could be many, could be zero. Man, I'm selling it hard, all right? But it's always an exciting period of time, Oscar month, so we're absolutely geeky about it. So that's it, MovieGeeksUnited.net.
Well, you know, you're not going to have to talk to any African Americans at all next month.
Yes, yeah. We were doing our predictions on our last program, and I said, you know, Leo will probably win Best Actor, and he will be the darkest winner of the night, Leonardo DiCaprio.
He and his swarthy looks, yeah. Jeez, man. I can't wait for Chris Rock to just have a fucking field day with that.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm glad he's the host this year, yeah.
Yeah, very fitting. So, Steven, what have you been up to? And is it true that you have recently written a episode of Final Girl?
Oh, no. It was a movie called Final Girl.
Wait a second. There's a movie and a TV show called Final Girl?
I guess. I don't know. And then there's another movie called The Final Girls with an S.
Oh, I'm thinking of Scream Queens.
Yes, I wish I wrote Scream. I wish I wrote an episode of Scream Queens. That'd been awesome. No, I wrote a movie called. I got a story by credit now because the original script I wrote, it kind of changed. But it's Abigail Breslin, Wes Bentley, Alexander Ludwig. He's in the other movie, The Final Girls. So yeah, I wrote that one. That came out over August. But I have another one. Hopefully coming out this year. It's about a VHS board game that opens the gates to another dimension. It's called Beyond the Gates, and it's produced by Barbara Crampton and it's directed by Jackson Stewart, and it's got some cool horror people in it, like Bria Grant from Halloween 2, Chase Williamson from John Dies at the End, and Graham Skipper from The Mind's Eye. So it's a little low-budget horror film I co-wrote, co-produced, coming out later on, hopefully this year.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
I am so confused by this whole Final Girls, Scream Queens thing, because Abigail Breslin was in Scream Queens.
Yeah,
and she's in Final Girl.
Yes.
Oh my God.
It's mad. Yeah, we sold Final Girl, and then Final Girl sold right after it, but then it took forever for Final Girl to come out. Yeah, I don't know. It's very weird. Yeah, she's in both. And then there's a movie called The Final Girls. So, yeah, it's pretty confusing. I haven't seen any of them yet, so I'll have to see. So I got to see.
I was hoping that when I read that you're doing Beyond the Gates, that it was a sequel to The Gate.
That would be freaking awesome. That was a big influence on it. Geez, I love The Gate so much. Hopefully the sequel. We can delve in.
Man, I know you are a huge horror fan, so that must have just been pretty awesome working with all these great people.
It was a dream come true because it was my dad. My dad took me to see From Beyond in the theaters, and I used to get Fangorias all the time, so I knew who Barbara Crampton was because of From Beyond and Reanimator. I had the biggest crush on her when I was a kid, and so humbled that all these years later she produced the script I co-wrote with this really awesome filmmaker, Jackson Stewart, and it was like a dream, man. It was like so cool to, it was an honor to have, to work with her. So it was very cool.
That's fantastic. So where can people keep up with you?
You can find me on Twitter. My handle is Neck, but it's X, the letter X, the word Neck, and the letter X again. So you can find me on Twitter there. I usually follow back pretty much everyone that follows me. So, and then there's a fucking link to a Tumblr, and you can see Vine shit and all this other crap.
You're selling that as good as Jamie was selling the Oscar month.
Yeah. It's like, why am I doing Vine? It drives me good. It's like, I don't know. Sometimes I come up with cool ideas, I think, and then no one likes it. So I guess I gotta keep doing it. I don't know. I don't know. I eat that shit up for some reason. Check out this Oscar month.
Could be frickin', Inarritu or any of these guys, or none of them. You never know. It's nice. It's like roulette.
Yes, it's a roll of the dice, man. I mean, when you set out to do your shows, you never know who's gonna bite, So
yeah. Bruce Willis and Danny-Aiello could have stopped by, but
that would have been awesome.
But no, instead I just continue to mine poor Daniel Waters' misery. It's like, what other embarrassing things have you done, Daniel? Let me just, go in there and cut into them and bring back all the pain.
I remember talking to the cinematographer of Battlefield Earth, and he was like, please ask me about anything other than Battlefield Earth.
Great episode, though.
And I was like, that's the only thing I want to talk to you about.
How did you get the camera to tilt so far?
Maybe there's a chance now with Creed that Bruce Willis and Danny-Aiello could do a Hudson Hawk too. Danny-Aiello gets him out of prison again all these years later. You don't know why he got there, and they do a new mission.
Just call it Hawk.
Yeah, call it Hawk. Exactly. Just do it like the Independent.
I remember that movie that did that was called The Hawk is Dying. I think that's probably what the sequel to Hudson Hawk would be called.
Where they could recast it with girls like they're doing the Ghostbusters and call it Lady Hawk.
I guess Charlie's Angels is the female Hudson Hawk in a way, because the action in that movie is so batshit, but it's missing the humor. But I enjoyed talking Hudson Hawk with you guys. That was awesome.
Well, thank you. It was great talking with you guys. I was so glad that we were able to do this. I mean, really, Steven, you really kicked it off when you just sent me that Richard E. Grant diary entry. It was just like, okay, yeah, we got to do this. Let's do it up. And then chase down Daniel Waters, and he was just like, oh God, okay, I'll talk to you again about something that makes me miserable.
Oh man, but it's a well-written script.
Yes, it is.
It's a very well-written script. I mean, if you can find it out there, listeners, it's a fun read. And like I said, you'll catch really fun lines of dialogue that I think went by a little bit too fast in the film. And I mean, I think it's a really sharp script, man. It was a really good read. Because I did this podcast is the reason why I read it. It read the novelization and enjoyed both. Gotta say.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to the show. Please go on over to our website, projection-booth.com. Leave us your feedback. Leave us your stories about Little Eddie. And, link on over to our iTunes. Leave us a rating and a review. It really helps. If you want, give us some of your money over at Patreon. We've got a Patreon going now. So just, those are some ways that you can make it up to Little Eddie, wherever he is, somewhere in monkey heaven.
A guy an underwater guy who controlled the sea. Got killed by 10 million pounds of sludge from New York and New Jersey. This monkey's gone to heaven. This monkey's gone to heaven. The creature in the sky got sucked in a hole. Now there's a hole in the sky, and the ground's not cold. And if the ground's not cold, everything is gonna burn. Well, I'll take turns. I'll get mine too. This monkey's gone to heaven. 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 Rock me, Joseph Alberto Santiago. If man is five, then the devil is six. The devil is six. The devil is six. There's six.
If you enjoy this show and want more people to know about it, head on over to iTunes, leave a comment, and rate it 5 stars. Make sure you like and share us on Facebook, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter. Just search for Christopher Media. Thank you in advance for supporting Christopher Media by clicking on the PayPal button and by clicking through to all the sponsors who support ChristopherMedia.net. Most importantly, we would like to take the time to extend an extra special thanks to you. Christopher Media could not exist without your support. Thank you for visiting ChristopherMedia.net, and thank you for listening. Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.